believe in our work, the life of the cities and the landscapes of cities is really important. That congregation, that common space, that shared space that we all have, the landscape, the way that we perceive landscape from the place that we're in and connecting it to the larger landscape itself. These look really weird here. I just want to make sure they look okay there. Okay. or the relationship of interior and exterior spaces and how we move through them and how that space is shared and what it feels like. And what should beauty be? Why should we have beautiful, comfortable spaces that allow us to reflect and to think and to dream and reflect and recharge? Or in civic spaces, where revitalizing areas of city lead to the revitalizations of whole cities, and having places where people can congregate, where they can be in crowds, where they can be themselves as kids, or the life of the city at night. These are the kind of things that the type of landscape architecture that I practice and my partners practice in Philadelphia really kind of makes our heart beat. Or thinking about how you add to cities with the forefathers and our thoughtful leaders in the Schuylkill Valley that really thought about protecting our watersheds and creating Fairmount Park and creating the parkway so that we can have these gardens within the gardens and that we have the relationship, the garden into the street, into the street, into the city. Again, how that looks in the day and how it feels at night, and the power of reflection. Or as Kelly said, the ability to be part of the transformation of a neglected civic space and thinking about how that can be transformed into a vibrant civic space worthy of its civic use and its importance. And more importantly, I think, how can we think about that as a transportation hub, connecting Philadelphia to every public transportation system, to Phoenixville, to the airports, and in that regard, to the world. So I'm thinking about all these things, and it's making me crazy when I'm talking to Kristen and Kelly and Kirsten. I'm thinking about these plazas, and I'm thinking about day, and I'm thinking about how they look at night, and I'm thinking about how complex this can be, and what is it that they really want me to talk about? Because I can just talk about this stuff forever. And all of a sudden I find them leading me subtly down this peculiar little bridge in this backyard and saying, well, could you maybe talk about this space? I said, well, yeah, it's got potential. I said, well, maybe I can't talk about the space itself. They said, well, how do projects start? How do we get going on this? I said, well, I don't know, but maybe I can talk about projects themselves and how they start. And they start from need, they start from opportunity. There has to be some feasibility to them. There has to be an incentive to do it. They have to be thought about in their programmatic ways. They have to be designed well, they have to be built well, they have to be maintained well, and they have to be populated well and programmed well. Beyond that, I said that I've never known a project that was successful that didn't have a huge component of vision and will in making those places. So I'm going to talk a little bit about different types of projects and how they happen. Some happen out of need, like Bryant Park. This is some of you are old enough to remember when it was called Needle Park and when it was so dismal, and how the transformation of this really became a huge part of Lower Manhattan. And not only was it a great place for people to be, people who live there, tourists, anyone there, but also how people can use it every day for so many things, to be a part of a crowd or to be themselves, or for uses we never even thought about. And one of the things that it does do is that, let me go back to this a second, because I've been traveling, I haven't gotten to the paper, but in Wednesday's New York Times, in the business section, it now says that Bryant Park, this wonderful public space, is the reason for the highest rental rates now in Manhattan. Once shunned, now quite loved. So the value of public space, not just to real estate agents, but to all of us, the value of public space is really important in how we use that. There are projects also that are about opportunity to grow in parts of cities. And Battery Park in Lower Manhattan is an example of that. How increasing and regularizing the whole edge of the Hudson gave the ability for multi-use buildings and for housing and for exterior recreation in areas that were never used. And that really made this part of Manhattan become a very, very active place, but is attractive to everyone who goes to New York to visit and have that sense of being able to be near the water in that expanse. And in leveraging that project, many projects are leveraged, as the energy of Battery Park City continued in the last developable open space in Wagner Park, we had the opportunity to transform this into this. And to me, that is really such a wonderful thing to be able to do. Or have, again, a variety of spaces, be they garden-esque or be they just places for people to enjoy the views to the water and to each other. And kind of serendipitously, that area that you saw before, that lawn panel, turns out it's a pretty good playpen. So they bring out these toys every day, and the kids come out with their moms and their caretakers, and this happens every morning at Robert F. Wagner Park. Again, serendipitous uses of our open space. But it was also part of understanding that vocabulary that set the rhythm of the esplanade, and that freedom of everyone to be able to walk the street, to walk the promenade, to be near the water, to have that relationship with the open space in cities. If we don't make our cities livable, then we're going to be sprawling everywhere. Sometimes projects happen in the most peculiar ways. Sometimes it's how the stars align, and sometimes it's actually by natural disaster. And Mission Bay in San Francisco was the last developable portion of San Francisco, in San Francisco proper. Hundreds of master plans have been done for this since like the 60s, but no one could develop it because the freeway cut it off, just like I-95 cuts us off from most of our waterfront. The freeway was cutting it off. It was also very difficult land. So unfortunately, with the earthquake, a lot of things happened, but one of the good things that came out of it was it opened up the whole bayfront to a different type of development. Very difficult to develop, toxic, sea muds, earthquake prone, very difficult to develop. But with the will, and also it had really wonderful aspects of it in the Mission Creek, and actually had a houseboat community, was the only thing living there, the people living there. But there was the will and there was the vision for it. So in terms of the master plan, it was really understanding how you can connect open spaces and with each other, but also how you can form space with buildings and long-term development. Now this stuff takes a while. This is like Battery Park, and these are 20, 30 years build-outs. They take a long time. So it does take will. It does take understanding the natural environment. It does take understanding how people live, what draws them, be it entertainment, what gets them there, what are the transportation systems that need to be in place, and how do you combine all of those with multi-uses of housing, education, transportation, and open space. And then sometimes projects just get invented. As Kelly said, the sculpture garden at the Philadelphia Museum of Art wasn't planned as a sculpture garden. It was part of a need for the museum to start understanding their parking so that then they could go do some of their other infrastructure projects. So they needed 500 spaces, and so he said, well, you don't really want a structure, that's not going to look good for a museum, but we could rip out the side of this hill, and then we could put the parking garage in it with natural ventilation and natural light. Then we could put the hill back on top of it and it could be a sculpture garden. Well, they weren't prepared to build the sculpture garden, but their vision and their will and their commitment allowed us to do it. And sometimes people call your bluff on this stuff, and then you actually do have to build it. So you start with digging a big hole, as far as I can tell, and then we built a structure within the structure to keep that open ventilation. And because I know some of you guys like to build stuff, and girls, guys, I don't care, whoever you are, I like to build stuff. This is just an homage to the Phillies that didn't go anywhere this year. Or how you actually start building this. This is all over structure. You have to use lightweight materials. Figuring out how to build all of this, and then to put, we actually excavated, we knew we were gonna find a lot of these large boulders, so we used them in these terraced ways to both block the views to the parking, but also to fit it into Fairmount Park and that whole area along the river. And yes, landscape architects actually do get to think about plants sometimes, but not often. But as the opening of it became closer to its fruition, it really has been an interesting and wonderful experience to watch how people use it and how it is open and how it's part of Fairmount Park. Again, how it can be a place of solace for an individual, or how it can react to the seasons and to just the place itself and to the art. And I really love to see how kids use places and how we can introduce them into some of our work. We even got a green roof on our green roof. And these are just some pictures I want to show you because they're about the context and how, actually this is another thing, if you haven't seen it, we actually got to do the Solowit conceptual piece of 4 lines in 4 directions. It's only been in for a couple of months. It's a temporary piece for 2 years, so go look at it. It's going to be really cool. But one of the things I think is really important to us is how we could think about the context of this place, make it look like it was part of the city, and really be of importance to the city and to the life of the city. So what does that have to do with Phoenixville? I'm not exactly sure, but it tells you how projects happen. And I really kind of was thinking about this place, and it is a city. You might not think it's a city, but it's a city. It happened on purpose in its natural environment. And you're really thinking about how your interior and exterior spaces work. Carter talked a lot about some of that regional aspect of it. You have some wonderful urban artifacts that you have shared and saved, and you've really worked to conserve significant buildings. And it has a kind of an interesting texture as you approach the place. You become as part of your natural environment as you move into it. You get to experience the difference between city and kind of that transformation to the place itself. And there's the place itself. Potential, yes, potential, yes, yes. It really does. It is kind of a cool place. Now, I don't really know what it should be, but I do know that you've thought a lot about your planning. You've done some comprehensive planning. You understand your land use. You understand transportation is important, both your vehicular transportation and how it's either good or bad, and how it can help you or just congest things. You've thought a lot about the future of the light rail, and you've thought about how you can incorporate some of those things. You've thought about how each of those segments can be developed. And if I can just draw your attention to those middle 3 pieces, and you have names for them, the historic downtown, the historic downtown extension, and the French Creek something area, I can't remember. But to me, one of the important things is think about them as a whole and leverage the ideas and leverage the opportunities within them. And again, I don't know what it should be, but my gut tells me it has something to do with connecting to the water, connecting to the railroad, connecting to your city, connecting to French Creek, connecting to your industrial heritage. I just want to show you one more project, and this is Napa Pike, and it was really about the vision of a developer named Keith Rogel, who actually lived here, who saw the importance of this place as an opportunity for affordable housing and a place of transportation. You can see it's on the Napa River. It's a navigable river that connects all the way to San Francisco, to the Bay. It's on the rail line that is known as the Wine Line. You can take it up to Calistoga and all those places. More importantly, 80,000 vehicle trips a day from end to end, with no place in the middle for people that can afford to live. So in thinking about this and developing this, the idea was to think about its industrial heritage and the urban artifacts, pipes, they made pipes. And actually in the planning of it, again, these corridors and connections of open spaces, using them as part of the landscape infrastructure, but also part of the stormwater management for the whole project, protecting the waters, making them navigable, thinking about how the streets work, how they fit together. What is that pedestrian experience? What is that transportation experience? What is it like to live there in affordable housing? What's it like to use those urban artifacts as part of the place, the gantry, of making that part of the town center? That it is about the place itself and how the place and the community, how it fits within that greater landscape. So I'm really not sure what your site should be, but Phoenixville, I'm telling you, in your own backyard, I would load for bear and I would aim high. Thank you.